I now had plans for a handful of moving elements, with no actual plan for how to move them. Let's do something about that. I want the column to move up and down. I have a basic understanding of how to turn rotational motion into linear motion using gears and a couple of lift arms, so I first rigged up a small system to do this. Helpfully, I did most of this just out of frame, so I hope you enjoy low-resolution side camera views. After a stern word from Tinkerbell, I sorted myself out. I had to make minor modifications to the design of the column to allow connection to the rig, then add in some guide rails to keep it upright. The first build kind of worked. Very wobbly, but promising. Now, strengthening is an easy task, but I wasn't quite sold on the guide rails. Technic lift arms don't pack as tightly together as system bricks, so there would always be some sway. Lego often uses plates with tongues paired with bricks with grooves to create guided movement. I could likely install one of these components into the column, but fitting the other to the frame I wasn't sure about. I thought maybe I could mirror the first driving mechanism and use two arms to lift the column, but the gears wouldn't rotate with this setup. I may well have set it up wrong, but looking at this, I had the idea to use the mirrored gears to drive gear racks. Looking through my box of gears, I had a few short gear racks, but I didn't think they'd be of much use here. But then I spotted something perfect in my miscellaneous box. It was simple enough attaching these long gear racks to the column, but I had some trouble spacing out the gears that would drive them. Connecting two different Technic bricks could solve this problem, but then I thought using only two gears may allow the column to lean sideways, so I introduced a second pair of them, only to then realise that the column could still lean and fall forwards. To prevent this from happening, I seated lift arms between the column and racks, which would allow the external frame to hook around them. I wasn't exactly happy with my brick-built gear holder. It was asymmetrical and would be awkward to make further connections to. I hadn't tested whether beveled gears would work here, and to my surprise, they fitted perfectly. From here, I was able to build a solid frame to hold everything together and support the structure, before finally adding in a motor to drive it all. Let's give this a test drive. So I had my column moving, but only in one direction. I needed a system to periodically change the direction of travel, so that it moves both up and down. I'm completely clueless when it comes to creating mechanical systems, but I found something with potential through a YouTube video. Copying the setup, it worked quite well, but for reasons I can't recall, I didn't go with this idea. Another video I'd found demonstrated a more complex system, switching a driving ring between two idling gears, forming connections to a drive shaft which would rotate clockwise or anti-clockwise according to which gear was connected. Yeah, it took me a while to get my head around it. The driving ring would be shifted by a changeover catch, which needed to rock back and forth. So I needed a switching mechanism to drive my switching mechanism. Okay. For my first attempt, I connected a couple of gears together via lift arms, which created an uneven, kind of violent motion. My second attempt slowed things way down with a worm gear, which looked a little more promising, so I figured I'd rig up a small test system. I completely botched this. I didn't realise I was missing a connector vital to the drive ring, so it wouldn't even entertain engaging with the gears. I told you I was clueless. Using a 3-long axle connector seemed to sort of work as a stand-in, but I wasn't sure about that rocker mechanism. I made an attempt at reinforcing the build, but movement still looked uneven, which would cause issues with travelling distances. I did have another idea in mind, one which I'd tested out for the robot arm in my Jurassic Park build, using lift arms to knock the knobs on each side of a turn wheel. It took me a while to rig up a frame to hold the knockers in place, but once they were in, this looked quite promising. Taking what I'd learned last time, I set out to create a much more compact and efficient version. Offsetting the Bionicle teeth allowed me to bring their axles much closer together and mesh the gears directly. This was looking much better, though I still shrank it just a little more before joining the gear shifter to it. I'd added in a chain to my previous model to drive the 2 drive shafts simultaneously, so I removed this and added it to the new model. Testing the build, I noticed that both outputs were spinning, even when the gears weren't connected to the driving ring, but I was hoping this was because they weren't under load. So I had a drivetrain and I had a column, but how would I connect the output from one to the input of the other? I tried adding additional gears to both the column and the shifter, but when meshed together, the framework of the column obstructed the turn wheel on the shifter. I could create some extra clearance space by adding in an idler gear, but 16-tooth gears really don't like to work with other gear sizes without a lot of additional framework. I could have used 16-tooth gears as the idlers here, but as you'll see in this next clip, I'm not always the smartest cookie. Three points to anyone who can tell me why this doesn't work. Yep, I had essentially connected my outputs together via that new axle I'd installed. Connecting them via a single axle resulted in the output always spinning in one direction, so I needed to split it in two. Thankfully, my brain cells started running again at this point, as I realised I could use the same joint I'd used in the column to run both outputs to one drive shaft. Never content with just one redesign, I went ahead and redesigned the redesign, reducing the size of my direction switcher considerably. Wow, just look at the size of that thing. It's tiny, it's so small. Gee, I've never heard that before. I'd also bought myself some linear actuators to replace the complicated framework I'd built. Now, I don't know how any Technic veterans feel, but these things seem very difficult to build a stable framework around, with only 2 awkward connection points. Still, I did what I could, and an initial test looked okay until the column lifted above the connection points. So I needed something to stop the column from spinning, and also to stop it leaning forward, both of which I sort of rectified with a few vertical lift arms, but I wasn't very happy with this effort. The whole thing was looking very flimsy compared with my old sturdy frame. I had another go at reinforcing it further, but it didn't really make any difference. There was still a lot of sag under the weight of the column. I did a bit of work off stream here, adding some counterweights to stop the actuators leaning and wheels to stop the columns from leaning. They certainly helped keep the columns more upright, but my makeshift battery-filled counterweights weren't really working for me. I bit of research revealed that Lego does in fact make weighted Lego bricks, largely used as counterweights in vehicles. With a few bricks in hand, I had to find a way of attaching them to the actuators, but the bricks only had stud connectors. Technic plates were the first method I had in mind. Slotting a pinhole over an axle, I thought swinging may be an issue when in motion, but with a little extra securing them, they actually performed quite well.